It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Today we have Chad Judner joining us, Peter Lawrence, and Payal Patel.
What's up?
Thank you for being here again. It's good to see you. We're going to talk about microcultures.
So if you read the article that Emily posted in our Slack channel, it's this article written by, and it's all about establishing microcultures within your organization. And Emily's thought was correctly that it's something that we happen to be doing really well at SDG, right? With all of our communities, with all of our opportunities that we give our consultants to connect with each other and to build communities within communities. The article, which will attach to whatever post we seem to align perfectly, one of our core values. Maybe it's not necessarily spelled out as a core value, but it is
thrive together.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Should we backtrack a little and do the old definition of a microculture for our audience? I didn't know what it was until I read the article.
In case we didn't read the article?
Yeah, it's just, subgroups within the organization, either intentionally form or organically form, that have their own culture, like a subculture of the greater company. You get these diverse groups interacting with one another, and groups within groups, and groups connected to other groups, a person that's in many groups. So you have this kind of homeostasis that happens of kind of communication and connection, and there's a lot of value to that. And, we're better together. And what is it? The sum is greater than its parts.
Yeah, and the points that they were trying to make is that throwing out blanket statements to try to cover and capture an entire organization's culture, once you reach a certain size, it just doesn't work. Right? Like it might still work for us because we are like hyper regional, right? Like we're a Midwest, Minneapolis based consulting company, and we are the biggest. I think that's still true. Because of all the acquisitions. So, the idea that, you just create a quote unquote company culture and that just is silly for massive organizations, especially.
Right.
And it's even a little silly for an organization of our size. And providing your resources the ability to connect with each other and build these tiny little cultures within overall umbrella is a massively valuable, and it helps with retention, it helps with communication, it helps with so many things.
It's just strong connection, and then through strong connection you get good communication, and that sense of belonging, and I have a place here, there's something for me to connect to, and then that kind of overlaps with our customers. Is we have teams of people that are working for our customers, and so those microcultures are our people and their people mixing together. So
we've talked about that before, right? Like Chad, where you've gone out and you've sort of introduced a whole kind of SDG culture to your client, right? And it didn't exactly start as smoothly as, hey, everybody, this is cool. And they all went, yes, it is. And away we go, right? So you kind of had to be like, oh, let's have a happy hour. Hey, let's go into the office and hang around each other and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. Coming out of COVID and doing that was incredibly difficult. And I don't know that everybody is having the same experience that I'm having at my client, but I've been at my client since, we were in the midst of COVID. Coming out of this, it was hard to get people out, but now it's just habit, and it's not just us going to the client's site. I don't know if you've noticed, but Wednesdays and Thursdays, the amount of people that attach themselves, we have other folks that like what we're doing. And so when we're in the office on Wednesdays and Thursdays, that group is getting slowly larger and larger on a regular basis. I remember starting that, doing a day of the week at the customer site, and then a day of the week at the office. And it was almost weird to some folks to see us in the office, right? Like I heard like, hey, what are they doing here? Right?
Yeah. They only come into the office for special reasons. What's the special reason?
Yeah. And so now it's kind of the norm. We're in almost every Wednesday, almost every Thursday. I try to get to my client site once a week, but it has gained the momentum that I had hoped it would, and I think it's powerful. I mean, it matters.
It's a microculture, right?
Yeah.
It is a microculture, and feel like the folks involved in that are having a better experience. Well, I'm hoping I'm helping them have a better experience than if they were just at home, heads down with all the chaos of everything around them.
But it's not prescriptive either. It's not like you're saying, hey, everybody, I'm going to be at the office Thursday. You had better be there too. It was more invitational. Hey, I'm going to be at the office. Love to see you there. Be okay if you're not there, but love to see you there, right?
And it's really just planting myself in a spot and seeing, who you pull into orbit with you. Yeah, it landed, and it's neat. I look forward to those days now more than, the Mondays and Fridays where I'm just at home. I mean, I like those days too because I got my dog with me.
And a podcast. I mean, come on.
I always look forward to hanging out with you guys. Yeah, the pulling, not even pulling people in, but like grabbing people, bring them to the office. Then we do events after almost every Wednesday, almost every Thursday. It's been really nice. I've enjoyed it. Nice. I'm glad that it's successful. I'm glad that we keep adding more and more folks to that group. Yeah, it works.
Yeah. So, Pyle, what microcultures are you part of at SDG?
As far as our communities,
groups you're involved with, customer groups, teams, things like that.
Quite a few. So I think from, there's the committee perspective of it. So I'm in SDG Gives, I'm in DEI. So those two are important to me. I was on the women's committee. I am no longer. And then from a learning standpoint, Brian Gannis, who of course joins the podcast, and I, we co-lead the analysis practice like Lunch and Learns. And then just for funsies, I'm all over like foodies and fur babies. I'm kind of a lurker. So it's like my social media habits where I sort of lurk and observe more than I contribute. But
I love that. I'm a lurker.
But you still feel part of the community, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because it feels like there's something for everybody, which, like you guys mentioned earlier, I think it's important for us to try to create that environment, especially because we don't necessarily have the luxury of trying to define what we are culturally when a lot of us are consultants who are assigned out to clients, and a lot of our day-to-day and the cultures we experience are based on our clients and not necessarily anything that is within SDG's control. So yeah, it is nice to have that.
Have you taken SDG microculture or whatever you want to call it out to the client and seen it kind of land out there a little bit?
I would say that's kind of tricky because there's probably a lot going on with SDG culturally, you know what I mean? So I don't know if there's necessarily an SDG specific microculture where I could be like, oh yeah, that's very SDG specific, and I've taken that over to the client.
Sure.
I know that one of the things that I really appreciate about SDG is like how human we are and how open we are and honest and kind of, like we like to inject a level of fun into things. And I don't want to overgeneralize for everybody, but that's kind of a bit of a microculture that I feel like we've created a lot with SDGers. And so there is type of dynamic that I personally connect with. Like I know that me as a person, I like to be like that. So that is something that I've also taken with me, culturally with my client, is like trying to create that type of environment for our teams as well. But my experience was super unique when I used to work for a different company in Vietnam, because we would have international clients. And I think that's where it becomes really tricky to kind of establish the cultures or say that, as a company, this is how we operate, because now you have like multinational cultural dynamics, So right. It's interesting because I could have a project where my client is spread across multiple countries where, I have stakeholders from Australia, but then I also have stakeholders from Malaysia, and you can't have the same type of interactions and the same cultural dynamics with them. With the Australians, you're probably going out to a lot of happy hours. Yeah, so I think that's something that you have to keep in mind, and that's where, you have to allow for things to kind of just flow naturally and where it makes sense and be sensitive to the same dynamic not really working across the board. I rambled, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
You know, I mean, you talk about the different types of interactions you have with different cultures. One of the things that I've found, because I work with a lot of offshore resources, it's when I don't adjust who I am and what I'm about for other cultures and other, you know, whatever you want to call it, right? Like the way they're used to. It is a lot of fun because it comes as a shock to folks, especially, you know, I'm thinking of like some of the East Asian cultures that I work with on a regular basis. It's initially it's like a little weird and they're like kind of like giggling and laughing and they're like, oh my God, wait, this is really like who he is and what he does. Like
we're going to see this every day.
This is, yeah, like, we see every day. And then you start like, just like the little questions start trickling in. And that's when you know, like, you've actually attached yourself to that group of people. Is like, well, wait, so you really, like, almost every single day you go out to have the one place, and then you do this and this, and I'm like, yeah, it's just like, and they really love it. One of the things that I've done that I've also noticed is I always have music on in the background. I don't for the podcast for copyright reasons, but when I'm in a meeting, we're listening to Wilco, Father John Misty, we're listening to all sorts of stuff. And my extended team now has, they've got a playlist, and it's like 90% my stuff. There's a lot of ways where you can build these little cultures and communities around the dumbest things. Like I say this so often, I'm a caricature of who I really am at work, right? Like,
sure.
I don't always drink Granville. I don't always have Fruity Pebbles mixed with Nerds candy for breakfast.
What?
But when people see me do that on camera, they lose their goddamn minds and they think, my God. And it's such a nice way to start building something, right? I don't know where I'm going with mostly rambling. And also,
well, I think, you know, looking at the story of, you know, creating that culture at your client, that was intentional, and that was the long game. You hung in there, and the word curated is like, but that's kind of what you did. You curated that and built that, and then microcultures kind of, you start that way and they take on a life of their own, but there always seems to be a nucleus that's holding, you know, some kind of binding agent that's holding everything together. And so it can change as different people come in and leave and things like that. You know, that keeps things diverse, and diversity makes things stronger. And there's Otis. Hi, Otis. Peter, you were going to say something before I made my little speech.
My hoodie on the ground. It's just, I can't stop looking.
He's just comfy. He's enjoying the cold temperatures and opportunity to stay warm indoors right now. I was thinking kind of along the same lines, Kyle, that like these microcultures, I think they're incredibly difficult to impose anywhere. It can be, they're kind of like plants. You can help them grow if you give them fertilizer or whatever you want to call it. They oftentimes start, they oftentimes fizzle out, right? Like something will happen, it'll be fun for a week or two, and then you're back to the same old doldrums for some reason. And there's been a number of places where I've gone to work where it's just been fun to go to work. It's fun to hang out with all the folks at work, and it makes the day go by so fast. And the culture just kind of was there, right? Like participated, had fun, it was great. And then as a consultant, sadly, sometimes, Chad might not know about this, but sometimes you move on to another client, and then you get to do it all over again, which is fun too, and it changes a little bit. But like, I'm working on a team with other folks from SDG now, and I wouldn't say that we've imposed SDG on them, but we've acted in a way that people liked and wanted to have more of. And so they're asking us, well, how did you guys figure out how to do that? And it's kind of like, well, SDG kind of hires to a profile, and we hire fun people. So
yeah, that's the biggest question. Is two big questions: is, you know, experience, competency, that piece of it,
right?
And are they fun to work with? Do we want to work with them? And I think that was implemented right after they hired me. They said, we need to do something about this.
They're like, man, Kyle's great. We got to replicate this.
Wrecked it. No. We want to avoid this from ever happening again. Yeah. He's a little much. Yeah, look at that. A microculture is a group of people. And every person is in charge of themselves. like they're steering themselves and they're connecting and they decide. So having an attractive microculture that brings them in and, fun, who doesn't want to have fun? Who doesn't want to be a part of people that are interested, have a shared interest, a shared mission, things like that. But yeah, the culture and the champion, it's like you always have to have a champion. When
and I know we're talking quite a bit about personalities, like injecting fun and things like that into the workplace, but a lot of culture also is just how you work together, right? Like how you communicate, how you collaborate. I know, when you think about Scrum, like you have the whole team working agreement, and that sort of defines a little bit of the culture that you're trying to create in your team because it's how you work together, right? And your culture inevitably in a work environment is to help contribute to some sort of good outcome when it comes to your work. And I think with these microcultures, it's important to understand that as an organization, like you're not going to be able to have the same type of culture or dynamic across your different teams, right? Like when you as an organization are saying, hey, we allow autonomy for all of our employees to be able to do their jobs exactly how they want to do it. And like, we're not going to define that for you. Okay, sure, that may work for like an IT department or a creative department, but like, are you going to be able to fulfill that same cultural promise to like your legal or regulatory departments? Probably not. There probably is a prescriptive way that they have to do things, and they're probably not going to have the same level of autonomy. So as an organization, when you start making these promises of what your culture is, I think you have to keep in mind the difference between your core values that you want everybody to operate under, that is like, this is who we are. And then there's the microcultures that you have to kind of allow to establish themselves, form themselves, depending on, the people and the nature of the work. And that's kind of how you have that diversity across your groups, and you let people just create what works for them, I guess, based on the nature of the work.
I like the thing that you said about, you can define core values, right? And you can try to find folks that fit in with them. I think one of the best things that you can get from leadership is once you've set that out there, not only, living those core values themselves, but also as people's lives change and their circumstances change, having honest conversations with your people around your core values and saying, listen, this is what we are about now. Mm-hmm. We're not seeing this out of you anymore. Maybe it's time to move on. Like I've seen that a few times, and it actually, it helps both sides, right? Because you don't want to have this entire organization with all of these values and then like just actively endorse people that do the opposite, right? That are, or not even actively endorse them, but like tacitly, like kind of just like passively endorsing them by not really addressing it.
Right.
I've seen that before, and it's helpful to everybody when that happens. I've never been affected by it, but at previous organizations, we do define. I worked at a large retailer locally, and they had core values, and they had programs around validating, that people are aligning with what those values are, and some folks didn't last through that. So,
well, I don't think you're endorsing laying off. I think you're endorsing that not everybody can work everywhere. There are people that excel at one organization that may switch organizations and just fall flat,
right?
Because the things that they brought, the intangibles, whatever you want to call that, kind of add to the macro culture of the organization, just really didn't fit. And you try as hard as you can to find the right people and give them the right opportunities. But sometimes it's, like you said, life circumstances change. Maybe they want to go off and, start their classic car organization or something like that. And it's just not going to fit.
For me, it's really just, I like our core values that we have at SD, right? And I like our mission statement. All of that is great. I would lose interest the minute we didn't actually like live those, right? And that I'm not a huge fan of just throwing words out there and not changing any of your actions around those words, right? And that's what I've seen other companies do a lot. Like, hey, we've got this new set of core values. This is what we're doing, and then nothing changes at all, right? Like nobody behaves any differently. Nobody, there's really no support around the values. There's no and nothing, right? Somebody changed some words on a website somewhere. Or on your intranet, And and then what, right? That's infuriating because
yeah, and
you want the core values to reflect the organization, not to, be broadcast to the organization.
And that can be a leadership, issue when, as a leader, you're wanting to impose this system of values on your people, but not yourself. And so you're not really adopting them. You're not being an example. And then, well, if they don't have to do it, if they're not doing it, it loses credibility and it just never happens. And then, like, what's the next hot, thing we can do to drive change, strength finders or, stuff like we're going to start, forming these teams intentionally based on specific strengths and all of that, and put you through all of this, testing and things. And then we're just going to go back to business as usual. And I've seen that happen. That's a true story, but it makes me sad.
And sometimes organizations are sometimes unintentionally or intentionally directly conflicting what they want to establish as a culture, right? Like, you may have a company that we won't name say that they're all about integrity and people, yet in reality, they have like a very sales-driven culture, right? And then all of a sudden, there are millions of fraudulent accounts being created to meet these sales demands. And then it turns out, well, how are you going to operate with integrity when people have to do unethical things to try to meet what ends up being your company culture?
Did you just describe Dunder Mifflin? Wasn't that Ryan Howard's whole scheme?
Are you talking about the reason I have 47 checking accounts?
I'm just making stuff up, guys.
All right.
It might have been in the news. But again, it's one thing to be a CEO and prescribe that, hey, we're a fun organization. And by the way, you need to be here at 8 a.m. every morning. Mm-hmm. We take lunch at exactly 12:30 for 37 minutes, and then we go home at 5. And do not stray from that no matter what. Right? Like, that's not a fun organization to most people.
Peter, you were 2 minutes late today, and
I was.
We really need you to be here on time.
But
you don't care about the 10 minutes later you worked. Yeah.
Well, and then you kind of think about that same example from like a microculture perspective, right? So within an organization, you may have, two different things going on. You may have somebody who works pretty solo on their tasks or their projects, and they're by themselves, and it's all kind of results driven as far as their work is concerned. So when they're told, hey, like, if you're going to be away for a couple of hours, or if you have an appointment, then you need to, let all these people know. Well, at that point, that feels like a micromanagement type culture that's getting created, right, for that person. But then you take that same scenario and you apply it into a team environment, right, where there's a lot of dependencies between people. There's person A who's waiting on you to complete X so that they can start their portion of the work. And it's super, a critical project, aggressive timelines. And in that sense, you ask that person, hey, if you're going to be away for a couple hours, just give us a heads up so we can plan around it. Like, that could be a very normal dynamic in that team, where it's just respect, it's transparent communication, it's how you guys operate because you want to, keep things moving, and that's completely okay, right? And that's allowing for that same scenario to be played out in different ways and different microcultures to be created within the same organization, right?
Oh, exactly. That's a great example where you're treating the exact same set of circumstances but differently,
right?
And it affects people differently, right? Like, I don't want to hold Chad up from doing his work because I had a dentist appointment and he's waiting on something specific, but he's got other work he can work on if he knows that I'm not going to get his stuff done for the time that I'm at the dentist, right? And that kind of respect and, changes it in a team dynamic that definitely isn't there. And sort of the solo time away and heads down developer. I'm going to develop as fast as I can and produce things, and you'll get them when you get them.
Yep. And I think that's the tricky part with leadership, right? Is recognizing, when things cannot be prescriptive or how it will be taken differently if it's a different set of people, and what things that you do want to kind of standardize as an organization as far as your values and things are concerned, and then what things just aren't going to work if you try to apply it across the board.
Right. We've all seen microcultures kind of die. You know, we've watched it. Somebody comes in and tries to prescribe something that just doesn't work with that team's dynamic, and they fall in line eventually, but it's not the same team.
Yeah.
It doesn't look the same. It doesn't act the same. It's maybe not even getting the same results done.
Yeah, I think of projects where you go in and you're new. If it's I've seen where a team comes in and they come in hot and they come in rigid. We are the experts. This is the way. And then anybody says different, it's kind of like just ignoring them. And I've seen teams get booted out of a customer.
I mean, consultants are that way too,
that.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you have to be flexible and connect and become a part of that microculture. In order to kind of transfer your knowledge to that team and move in the right direction, you got to have people in agreement. If you're going to move forward, you got to have kind of a shared paradigm of reality of the project and the work you're doing and how you're going to do it, and some agreement around that. It's better to have autonomous people in agreement and coordinating with each other than to try to, play chess and grab everybody and force people into things and, the hyper control. That doesn't help. But too flexible, too easy, things kind of fall apart. Too rigid, too hardcore. You can't break into a microculture and, it's easily shattered. It's a really interesting dynamic, and it can be very complex, but I look at that kind of stuff like they're creating an entity. Like a company is like a super organism. It's like an anthill, a beehive. We create those on the fly. One person can be part of multiple microcultures. Human beings are the ultimate collaborators. And
well, hold on. I saw ants take a letter T through a gate, and they did better than humans. So,
and there's way more ants than people.
There were way more ants there, but we're second. How about that? I will say that, we sort of talk about our Slack sort of social and learning communities as being sort of a microcultures or many different microcultures. And I think fur babies, I wouldn't even call a microculture. It kind of is, but it's kind of just a fun place to look, right? It's sort of a, hey, these are our pets and we love them, and this is the crazy thing that Otis is doing today. He's lying in a sweatshirt and staying warm. But at the same time, the beer community will mostly talk about beer, but not only talk about beer, right? They're not just only about the thing that they're talking about, because those people that get together on the beer social will have common interests, and then they'll share them along with other parts of the organization and crisscross.
And at some point, they've all done home brewing. And
haven't we all?
Tech people getting into a hobby like home brewing, and then it's like, okay, on my phone, I've got my temperature sensors and alerts, and here's my system, and get really into it. And it's really fun to watch. Chad, what microcultures are you part of at SDG?
That's a great question. So AI, motorcycles, whiskey, beer, the foodies one I love. I posted a picture of my diet there, and I got a lot of comments and a lot of offers to help me, and that was nice.
I think I missed this. So I gotta look for this post.
I was told to start eating breakfast, so I posted a picture of my breakfast, and there were some concerns. But so I started the motorcycle one a while ago because I didn't realize there were so many riders at SDG.
Yeah.
That one's been kind of neat. It kind of dies off. I mean, obviously it dies off in the winter, but it also
nobody's riding today.
Come on, toughen up.
But we have a car culture. We have almost everything you could imagine. We have at SDG, and it's. I could see how some folks would come in and kind of find it a little bit overwhelming. But yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I find myself one of the more helpful cultures is we have this gaming thing. So Friday, Saturday night, now for your buddy. Instead of always being out at a happy hour or at a bar too late, I am often at home in front of my PS5 playing Warzone with my coworkers.
Oh, nice.
Playing Call of Duty. So that's healthier, kind of. Getting screamed at and called profanities by 12-year-olds is actually a step up from what I'm normally doing.
And just sounds hilarious.
They're
You
so
gotta have
bad.
thick skin. Yeah.
I'm like so hilariously bad. I get called so many names and I just giggle. I think it's hilarious.
But to your point about it being overwhelming, like I can see it because there are so many different channels and communities going on. But at the same time, you know, when you think about it from the perspective of the diversity of people, and, you know, sometimes the most social and the loudest ones are, you know, we tend to kind of represent a lot of people just because we tend to be seen. But then there's a lot of people who end up, you know, accidentally getting isolated or feeling alienated because they don't fit into these like really popular groups and they don't fit into that mold. So, you know, like when you call yourself a culture that's super social, or like, you know, we go out for drinks a lot and we like to have fun, it's like, well, that kind of shit for the introverts and the sober people, or, you know, like some of the ones that have all these different interests. So I do appreciate that about our communities. Like it really does feel like there's a little something for everybody. And if there isn't, then, you know, there's that freedom to kind of create a new community and build that if you need to create that microculture. So that's cool.
I didn't even realize that there was a motorcycle group out there. Probably because I don't have a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Now, Peter, you've been with SDG the longest of the four of us.
I have.
And when it was much, much smaller, what was the landscape like for microcultures?
You know, it was a little bit different. It was more because we could all get together and know everybody's name and have something in common with everybody. And you know, we were all kind of just getting into this rough, scrappy little consulting firm and having fun. I remember the company meetings where we, you know, cup stacking was a big thing a long time ago. So we had teams compete in cup stacking, and that kind of brought, you know, having some fun at a company meeting kind of brought people together. But yeah, you know, there's always been sort of that, hey, I'm going to go learn about this. You guys want to come and help me, or, you know, maybe let's start a book club. I mean, book club's been going on for an awful long time too. And that's one of those, like, it started as one person said, I would like to do this thing where they read a bunch of books as sort of a mini MBA. Like, we're not doing anything close to mini MBA stuff anymore, but we're still reading books and talking to authors. We had author in just last week, partly due to this podcast and some of the things that we do here. So, you know, it's kind of weird how things all connect in this hugely connected world of ours.
Shout out to Brian Davidson.
That's right.
Author of his book that I don't have in front of me, and so otherwise I'd plug it.
Are you sure you don't have it in front of you, or you just think you don't have it
I
in
put
front
it
of
on
you?
the bookshelf because
Oh, okay.
I read it, but I don't remember the title. Now I feel bad. So you go into an organization and you can't really find the thing to fit into. And then maybe you get a customer and it's just you, and you're doing heads down development, and so you're in your cubicle somewhere and there's like crickets and tumbleweed rolling through and it's like walking, you know, and then you're on Slack and you see all these groups and all this chatter and special events, and I bumped into these people and all the fun happening. And yeah, I have a heart for those people because I've been that people where it was awkward and you drift away as you're just working somewhere else. A lot of it has to do with proximity and opportunity to engage in these different groups and to be part of it. But yeah, if you can't find one, maybe try to start one. And most of our stuff, one of our secret superpowers, I'm gonna let this out, is that our consultants, you guys, initiate a lot of the stuff. You start a lot of the stuff, are involved in it on top of doing great work for our customers. And it's like, you don't have to. Kyle, you don't have to be here today. Chad doesn't have to be here. Peter does, because I can't do this by myself. I can't do this without Peter. It doesn't work.
I got a podcast.
But it's, you know, it's voluntary.
But I think what you're saying, Kyle, is very true. Like it's hard to sort of put your shingle up and say, I'm going to start my, you know, basket weaving group. But if you sit there every day at, take a break and weave baskets for 10 minutes, you might find that there's one or two other people that are going to come by and like, hey, what are you doing? What's the basket for? Why are you making this basket? Just to pick a sort of an absurd example, because I'm not a basket weaver. I wouldn't know how to start. But, I might stop and talk to the person about basket weaving just to find out what the heck they're doing and why they're doing it and what got them into basket weaving and make that connection. And maybe that's not going to be a microculture, but it might lead to something else that becomes a microculture. Like Chad going into the office on every day or on a particular day. I'm guessing there were a few days that it was one or two people, and it was maybe not the party that it has become today, right? Like
those 2 days were freaking exquisite. Like just me and able to do things.
Started out as a nice quiet place to work and became a fun place to work that's fun to visit, right?
There was what is that theory where you get to a certain size and you can't maintain your culture anymore? Was it 50? That was that magic number.
Something about 150 people that you can't communicate with effectively more than that. And so everything breaks down at that point. But, it just changes into a lot of micro 150 people organizations that mix together, I think is
well, I think,
it could be a good thing.
It's like, okay, well, we don't have 150 microcultures. No. So, that's the answer to that is we're going to operate and have that kind of layer of abstraction and maintain our overall culture through our microcultures, even though we don't feel as connected to the whole as we used to. And I think that's something you kind of grow into. I think we've grown into that. I don't feel like we're still in that state where it's a problem. I think we're in a place now where we can grow infinitely and our microcultures can grow and change and to support that large structure.
I don't think, this kind of goes back to the topic of like your core values versus your cultures, right? Like as you grow, it's okay to try to maintain your core values, but it's also, critical that you allow all these microcultures to flourish because, that means you're going to have diversity of thought, how you approach things, how people brainstorm, how you adapt as things change. Like when you have all of these different people operating in different ways, if anything shifts with the market or, like you get acquired or whatever, you're able to navigate that a lot better rather than if you were prescribing this kind of single monoculture across your organization where everybody kind of thinks and operates and works the same way. And then as soon as anything shifts, you're like, oh crap, we've been so rigid. Like, what are we supposed to do? Now we do fall apart, right?
Yeah, I think those core values, when you live them, that's your consistent thread that runs through all of your microcultures. And that's your consistent. It's like they all sit on that substrate, your values, and makes it, I think, easier to sustain and grow those subcultures, create new ones, because you have a foundation. Wrap this up with some final thoughts. We'll pick on Pyle. We'll let you go first.
Oh, no, I wasn't ready.
I can go. I'll take the easy ones and leave you guys having harder ones to go for. Microcultures, they always exist. Sometimes they're awesome. Occasionally they're, kind of cliquey, but, if you can kind of tend that microculture garden rather than, assume that it's a machine that builds microcultures, it's a garden that's going to grow and you may have to take care of it a little bit. I think that's the way to look at it. And I don't know, that it always seems to make things more fun.
I think it is all about balance, right? Keeping that balance within your organization, balancing between, creating an environment where people aren't, so siloed in their microcultures that they struggle to work together, but then also allowing them to flourish, within their microcultures. So, balance.
Yeah.
I think that one of the keys is not trying to throw too much control on the entire thing, right? I think a lot of places their inclination is to like get in there and try to like throw up some guardrails and do all this stuff when it's absolutely not necessary, right? If they see it happening, stay out of the way. All you need to do is really just provide, provide funding if it's a microculture that wants to do a thing, right? Provide resources, time, whatever you need, but don't try to be prescriptive and restrictive around some of this stuff. You'll have a much better experience if you do that.
My final thought is if you see some microcultures you want to be a part of and you just can't seem to don't try too hard to break into a microculture that's has a wall up, and it's like you probably don't want to be there. You probably don't want to be part of it if it's not your thing. One example is when we started the guitar jam, it was just acoustic for beginners and things like that, and then it kind of had a rebirth, and then it was more advanced players with amps and pedal boards and electric guitars and all of that. And I hadn't played in a long time, and I was just didn't feel like I fit in with that anymore. So I was like, you know what? I had a good run. It was great. I enjoyed it, but now it's become something else, and someone else owns it, and it's going to continue that way. And it's a little different, and that's fine, because stuff's going to change. People are going to change it. One new member to that microculture can drive a lot of change. I think leadership changes. Leadership is important, champions, those kind of things to keep it going. But I think just understand that there's a life cycle, there are seasons, and change will happen. And I think with that, we'll shut her down and say goodbye, everybody. And we'll see you at the gig.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.